5 families built Southern California. The beaches, the railroads, the mansions, the movie colonies, the planned communities where 20 million people now live. And 5 photographs, taken between 1869 and 1951, contain hidden evidence that explains exactly how they did it. Evidence that sat in plain sight for over a century, until someone finally looked close enough to see it. These photographs sat in university archives, family vaults, and corporate collections for decades. The Huntington Library, UC Irvine Special Collections, the Hearst Corporation Archives, the Doheny Family Private Collection. When archivists finally applied modern digital enhancement, adjusting contrast, magnifying hidden corners, analyzing shadows, they discovered something remarkable. Each photograph contained deliberate evidence. Documents clutched in hands, figures watching from windows, armed guards hidden in shadows, mathematical formulas scrawled in margins. Evidence the founders wanted preserved, but not immediately understood. By minute 8, you'll see the document that transferred 1/3 of Orange County into a single immigrant's hands, still clutched in his fingers the moment the photograph was taken. By minute 18, you'll watch a figure standing in a mansion window, the same man who would allegedly commit murder in that exact room 11 days later. And by minute 32, you'll understand why 67 living heirs to a $13 billion empire will never, control a single share of it. The answer was hidden in a handwritten margin note that the family didn't discover until 1997. What you're about to discover is how California was really built. Not through luck or timing, but through calculated moves documented in photographs the founders themselves commissioned. They knew what they were doing, they wanted proof, and they got it. 5 families, 5 photographs, 5 hidden elements that explain everything from why Malibu costs $50 million per acre to why the Hearst grandchildren will never run their grandfather's empire. Let me show you exactly what was hidden in the first photograph, starting with an Irish immigrant who arrived in California with nothing and died controlling more land than some European countries. September 1876. The Irvine Ranch headquarters. Santa Ana Mountains rising in the distance, hazy with California afternoon light. A sepia-toned albumin print, 8 by 10 inches, mounted on cardboard backing. The photographer's stamp reads Bradley and Rulofson, San Francisco, one of the most prestigious portrait studios on the West Coast. 4 men stand before a wooden ranch house with a wraparound porch. To the left, split-rail corrals hold 6 horses, 40 or 50 cattle graze in the middle distance. A single massive oak tree throws partial shade across the group. On the far left, a Mexican vaquero, a ranch hand, holds horse reins, leather chaps, wide-brimmed hat, face weathered by decades under the California sun. He's perhaps 45 years old. Beside him, seated on a wooden chair that's been brought outside specifically for this photograph, sits James Irvine Sr. He's 49 years old. Irish immigrant. Full beard going gray. And despite the dusty ranch setting, despite the cattle and horses and working men around him, he wears a formal dark wool suit, imported, expensive. A gold watch chain gleams across his vest. Standing slightly behind Irvine is a nervous-looking man in city clothes, Benjamin Dreyfus, an attorney. His shoes are visibly muddy from the ranch grounds. He carries a leather satchel. His expression suggests discomfort, urgency, or both. To the far right stands Thomas Lawson, the ranch foreman, arms crossed, shotgun leaning against the fence post beside him. 2 ranch dogs lie in the shade beneath the porch. Dust hangs in the air, suggesting recent cattle movement. The water trough in the foreground is half full. Shadows indicate late afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock. Everything about this photograph screams staged occasion. A formal portrait in an informal setting. City clothes on ranch land. An attorney who traveled from San Francisco for what exactly? Look at James Irvine's hands. His left hand rests on his knee, relaxed, natural. But his right hand is positioned differently. It's pressed against his chest, slightly below his chin. He's holding something. At normal resolution, you see only a white rectangle. A piece of paper, perhaps, a letter, nothing remarkable. But when archivists at UC Irvine Special Collections applied modern digital enhancement to the original glass plate negative, adjusting contrast, magnifying the image to 400%, something emerged from that white rectangle. Something that explained why an Irish immigrant in a formal suit was sitting for a portrait on a dusty California ranch with an attorney who had traveled 300 miles from San Francisco. Something that explained everything that came after. The document is folded into thirds, held vertically against his chest. The enhancement reveals partial text at the top edge. Agreement of sale and transfer. A date visible in the corner, September 12, 1876. An amount partially obscured, $15,000. $150,000. And at the bottom fold, visible through the paper, two signatures, Flint and Bixby. James Irvine was holding the buyout agreement. The document that transferred sole ownership of 110,000 acres, 1/3 of what would become Orange County, from a three-family partnership into his hands alone. This photograph wasn't a casual portrait. It was a victory photograph. Taken within hours of the signing, the attorney, Benjamin Dreyfus, had just arrived from San Francisco with the final documents. Irvine posed with the paper still in his hands, proof of what he had just accomplished. The largest private landholding in Southern California history. Consolidated in a single afternoon. And documented for posterity. The back of the photograph bears an inscription in faded pencil, barely legible until digitally enhanced. J. Irvine-esque, Rancho San Joaquin, the day of the settlement, for posterity. For posterity, Irvine wanted this moment preserved. He wanted future generations to see exactly what he held in his hands the day he became sole owner. But the photograph raises more questions than it answers. How did a man who arrived in California with virtually nothing manage to buy out two wealthy partners for $150,000, the equivalent of nearly $5 million today? Who were Flint and Bixby, and why were they willing to sell? The Orange County archives contain deed records dating to California's territorial period. The UC Irvine Special Collections holds the Irvine Company papers, business correspondence, legal documents, personal letters spanning from the 1860s through the 20th century. But to understand how James Irvine came to hold that document in 1876, you have to go back further. Back to Ireland. Back to the Great Famine. Back to a young man who left everything behind. James Irvine was born in 1827 in County Down, in what is now Northern Ireland. Scots-Irish, Protestant. His family were tenant farmers, not owners. They worked land that belonged to someone else. When the potato blight struck in the mid-1840s, Ireland collapsed. 1 million dead, another million emigrating. James Irvine was among them. He arrived in New York sometime around 1846. He was 19 years old. He had nothing. The California State Archives hold records from the Gold Rush era. Among them, a business license issued in Sacramento, 1855. Hopkins and Irvine, general merchandise, mining supplies, provisions, hardware. James Irvine didn't dig for gold. He sold supplies to the men who did. This distinction matters enormously. Miners went boom and bust. They struck veins or they didn't, most didn't. But merchants who sold picks and shovels and flour and rope, they made money regardless, steady income while others gambled. By the late 1850s, Irvine had accumulated enough capital to begin investing in San Francisco real estate. Land, the one commodity that couldn't be depleted like a gold seam. And then he met the Flint and Bixby families. The Flint and Bixby families were Maine Yankees who had made fortunes in the wool trade. By the 1860s, they controlled vast grazing lands across California, sheep operations stretching from Monterey to Los Angeles. In 1864, they invited James Irvine into a partnership to acquire Mexican land grant ranchos in Southern California. The Flints and Bixbys contributed capital. Irvine contributed management. He would oversee the actual ranching operations. Together, they purchased 3 enormous ranchos: Rancho San Joaquin, Rancho Lomas de Santiago, and portions of Rancho Santiago de Santa Ana. Combined, these holdings totaled roughly 110,000 acres. They stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Santa Ana Mountains. 23 miles of coastline, more land than the entire island of Martha's Vineyard. For a decade, the partnership functioned. Sheep grazed, wool shipped, profits divided. But by the mid-1870s, tensions had emerged. Letters preserved in the Bixby family collection reveal the dispute. The Flints and Bixbys wanted to subdivide. Settlers were arriving in Southern California. The railroad was coming. Land prices were rising. Sell parcels to farmers, take profits, diversify. James Irvine refused. A letter dated March 1875, Irvine to Llewellyn Bixby. You propose to carve our holdings into quarter sections for farmers who will exhaust the soil in a generation. I propose to hold the land intact for purposes we cannot yet imagine. The railroad will increase values tenfold. Patience, not haste, builds fortunes. Bixby's response, April 1875. You speak of patience while opportunities pass. We have held this land for a decade. It is time to harvest the investment. The partners were deadlocked. And in 1876, Irvine made his move. James Irvine borrowed heavily. Bank records from Wells Fargo and the Bank of California show loans totaling nearly $100,000, secured against his San Francisco real estate holdings. He was betting everything. If the land values declined, if drought struck, if the railroad bypassed the region, if settlers never came, he would lose not just the ranch but his entire accumulated fortune. On September 12, 1876, the papers were signed. $150,000 changed hands. Flint and Bixby walked away with cash. James Irvine walked away with 110,000 acres. And within hours he sat for that photograph, the document still in his hands, the attorney still beside him, victory frozen in silver and light. He was 49 years old. He had arrived in America with nothing. And now he controlled more California land than any private citizen in history. An Irish famine survivor had just consolidated 1/3 of what would become Orange County. He held the proof in his hands when the photograph was taken. But James Irvine's gamble wouldn't pay off in his lifetime. The real question, the question that would determine whether his descendants became billionaires or bankrupts, was this: would future generations hold the land or sell it? Stay with me. By minute 12, you'll understand the specific decision that transformed worthless scrubland into $200 billion in real estate value. And by minute 18, we'll move to our second photograph. A Beverly Hills mansion where a figure in a window would become evidence in one of the most mysterious deaths in California history. James Irvine hadn't just bought land. He'd bought a target. The Southern Pacific Railroad was expanding aggressively through California in the 1870s and 1880s. They needed right-of-way. They had eminent domain powers, and they had no hesitation about using political connections to seize private property at below-market prices. Simultaneously, homesteaders began invoking federal land acts, claiming that portions of the old Mexican land grants weren't legally valid, that the land should be opened for settlement, that one man shouldn't control what could support thousands of families. And former Mexican rancho heirs challenged the original grants in court, arguing that the sales to American speculators had been fraudulent, coerced, or invalid. The Irvine Ranch faced threats from above, the railroad, from below, squatters, and from the past, legal claims stretching back to Spanish colonial rule. James Irvine spent the remaining decade of his life in courtrooms. Case files from the Los Angeles County Superior Court show. 1877, Southern Pacific Railroad v. Irvine right-of-way dispute, settled after 2 years of litigation. 1879, United States v. Rancho Santiago de Santa Ana, federal challenge to land grant validity, dismissed after Irvine produced original Spanish documents. 1882, Martinez family v. Irvine Company, claim by descendants of original Mexican grant holders, ruled in Irvine's favor. 1884, California State Lands Commission inquiry, investigation into water rights. Irvine retained all riparian claims to Santa Ana River. Each case cost thousands in legal fees. Each case risked losing portions of the ranch. Each case Irvine won. But the battles took a toll. James Irvine died in 1886, just 10 years after the buyout photograph was taken. He was 59 years old. James Irvine left behind a widow, a 16-year-old son also named James, and 110,000 acres of contested, undeveloped, income-draining California real estate. The will placed the ranch in trust until the son reached maturity. Professional managers oversaw operations. The boy, James Irvine II, would eventually inherit everything. But not everyone expected him to keep it. Letters from Flint and Bixby family members, preserved in the California Historical Society collection, reveal their expectations. The widow will sell within the year. She cannot manage such an enterprise. The boy is soft, raised in San Francisco society. He has never branded a calf or ridden a fence line. The ranch will break him or bore him. We may yet recover what his father stole from us. They were wrong. James Irvine II assumed control of the ranch in his mid-20s, and he surprised everyone. Contemporary accounts describe a man who rode his property obsessively, sometimes covering 40 miles in a single day. He inspected every fence line. He knew every water source. He supervised every planting decision. A letter to his wife, dated 1891. The city men think I am playing at ranching. They visit for a weekend and believe they understand the land. I live on this soil. I taste its dust. I know every acre because I have ridden every acre. They will never take what my father built. In 1894, he incorporated the family holdings as the Irvine Company, shifting from a family trust to a corporate structure that could make contracts, borrow capital, and plan decades into the future. And he made the decision that would prove more valuable than the land itself. Developers arrived constantly. The early 20th century brought wave after wave of speculators offering to buy portions of the ranch, subdivide the coastline, sell the hills for citrus groves, carve the valleys into farms. James Irvine II refused them all. A 1912 letter to a Los Angeles real estate syndicate. Gentlemen, you offer me substantial sums for parcels of my property. You propose to create small farms and modest communities where I see future cities. My father understood that intact land compounds in value. Fragmented land produces only fragmented returns. The answer is no. The answer will remain no. Do not contact me again. His neighbors sold. The Stearns Rancho was subdivided. The Sepulveda holdings fragmented. The Domings estate parceled out. Irvine held 110,000 acres, intact, waiting. James Irvine paid $150,000 for those acres in 1876. Today, the land that remained in the Irvine Company portfolio, developed into the master plan city of Irvine, the Irvine Spectrum, Fashion Island, and dozens of commercial and residential properties, is valued at approximately $200 billion. Not millions. Billions. The document James Irvine clutched in that 1876 photograph represented the single most valuable real estate transaction in American history. And the family's decision to hold, generation after generation, transformed worthless scrubland into the most expensive planned community in the nation. But here's what makes the Irvine story truly strange. No Irvine controls that fortune today. The family lost the company, not to bankruptcy, not to bad investments, to a single man who understood their playbook and used it against them. I want to ask you something. James Irvine borrowed everything he had to buy out his partners. He risked his entire fortune on land that experts called worthless. His partners thought he was foolish. Would you have the courage to bet everything on a vision that no one else believed in? Or would you take the safe money and walk away like Flint and Bixby did? Tell me in the comments, are you a holder or a seller? An Irish immigrant's $150,000 gamble became a $200 billion empire. His descendants held the land for nearly a century, exactly as he'd planned. But they made one mistake. They let an outsider see how the game was played. Donald Bren, the man who now controls the Irvine Company, is worth $19 billion, and he learned everything from watching the family he eventually replaced. But before we see how that happened, we need to examine our second photograph. A Beverly Hills mansion, a Society magazine photo shoot, and a figure standing in a second-floor window, the man who would allegedly commit murder in that exact room 11 days later. The Irvine photograph documented triumph. A man holding proof of his greatest victory, a dynasty born in a single afternoon. Our second photograph documents something darker. February 1929, Beverly Hills, the most expensive private residence ever built in California. A society magazine had come to photograph the young heir and his wife at their magnificent new estate. The photograph they took seemed peaceful, elegant, the perfect image of Gilded Age success. But when researchers enhanced the image 90 years later, they noticed something in a second-floor window. A figure watching, waiting. The man in that window would allegedly commit murder in that exact room 11 days after the photograph was taken. This is the story of the Doheny family. And this is the photograph that captured a killer before he struck. Black and white, silver gelatin print, 11 by 14 inches, professional quality, stamped on the reverse, Lowe's Angels Illustrated Monthly, February 1929. The photograph shows Greystone Mansion from the southeast angle, 55 rooms of Tudor Revival grandeur, 46,000 square feet, 16 acres of manicured gardens stretching toward the camera. A 1928 Packard automobile sits in the circular driveway, cream-colored, chrome gleaming. A fountain operates in the garden, water spray frozen mid-arc. 3 people are visible on the grounds. Standing beside the Packard is Edward N. Doheny Jr., age 35, light-colored suit, hand raised as if waving to the photographer. His smile is confident, practiced, the smile of a man who has posed for cameras his entire life. Seated on a garden bench is his wife, Lucy. She wears a fur-collared coat despite the mild February weather. Her expression is pleasant, but something about her posture suggests strain, tension. She's not relaxed. In the distant background, nearly invisible, a gardener trims hedges, face obscured by hat and distance. A chauffeur stands at attention by the car door. Formal uniform, professional stillness. February morning light, clear winter sky, rose bushes dormant but maintained. 2 stone lions flanking the entrance steps, an American flag flying from the rooftop. Everything about this photograph projects success, stability, American aristocracy at its finest. But look at the mansion itself. The second floor, 14 windows visible on this facade. Most show open curtains, normal for morning light. One window is different. Third from the left, the curtain is partially drawn, and behind it, a shadow, a shape. A figure. When digital enhancement is applied to that window, contrast adjustment, shadow analysis, resolution magnification, the shape becomes clear. A man standing approximately 3 feet back from the glass, height 5'10" based on window frame proportions, posture slightly hunched, hands possibly clasped in front of his body. He's watching the photography session below, watching End and Lucy pose for the magazine. Watching but not joining. His face isn't distinguishable at this resolution, but the head shape, the hair, the height, all consistent with one person. Hugh Plunkett, N. Doheny's personal secretary, his childhood friend, his closest confidant. And according to official records, the man who would shoot N. Doheny to death in that exact room 11 days after this photograph was taken. The guest bedroom, second floor, third window from the left. The same room where both bodies would be found on February 16, 1929. To understand why Hugh Plunkett was hiding in that room, watching but not participating, you need to understand what was closing in on both men. The Teapot Dome scandal had consumed American politics for years. At its center was Edward L. Doheny Sr., N's father, one of the wealthiest oil men in the world. In 1921, Doheny Sr. had given $100,000 in cash to Albert Fall, the United States Secretary of the Interior. Shortly afterward, Fall granted Doheny's company exclusive drilling rights to the Elk Hills Naval Oil Reserve in California. Doheny called it a loan between old friends. Federal prosecutors called it a bribe. And the money hadn't been delivered by bank transfer or check. It had been delivered in cash, in a black bag, hand-carried to Secretary Fall's office. By 2 men, N. Doheny Jr. and Hugh Plunkett. By February 1929, both men had been subpoenaed to testify before Congress. Both faced potential perjury charges if their testimony contradicted what Doheny Sr. had already said under oath. Both knew that their words could send N's father to prison. The investigation wasn't just closing in. It had arrived. Hugh Plunkett was falling apart. Witness statements collected after the deaths paint a portrait of a man in psychological collapse. His wife told investigators. Hugh believed he was being followed. He said federal agents were watching our house. He stopped sleeping. Some nights he sat by the window until dawn watching the street. A family friend reported. Hugh told me he knew too much. He said they would never let him testify. When I asked who they were, he couldn't answer, or wouldn't. By February 1929, Plunkett had essentially moved into Greystone Mansion. Officially, he was a guest of the Dohenys. Unofficially, he was being watched. N's private secretary, his childhood friend, now a liability, a man who might crack under pressure and say things that couldn't be unsaid. The photograph was taken on February 5, 1929. A Society magazine photo shoot designed to project normalcy. The Dohenys at their beautiful new estate. Everything is fine. Nothing is wrong. But Plunkett refused to come outside, refused to be in the photograph, refused to pretend. Instead, he stood at the window of the guest bedroom, watching, waiting. 11 days later, both men would be dead in that room. If you're still watching, you understand something the 1929 investigators never considered. That figure in the window wasn't just watching a photo shoot. He was watching his own future unravel. Stay with me. In the next 2 minutes, you'll see exactly what happened in that room on February 16th, and why the official story has never made complete sense. February 16, 1929, shortly before midnight. A servant at Greystone Mansion heard 2 gunshots from the guest bedroom. The same room where Plunkett had been staying, the same room visible in that window. The servant ran to find N. Doheny. N's wife, Lucy, called the family physician, not the police. The physician, Dr. Ernest Fishbaugh, arrived within minutes. 45 minutes passed before anyone called the authorities. When police finally arrived, they found 2 bodies. N. Doheny shot once in the head. Hugh Plunkett also shot in the head. A .45 caliber pistol lay between them. The official ruling came with remarkable speed. Murder-suicide. Hugh Plunkett, in a state of mental disturbance over the Teapot Dome investigation, had shot his friend and employer, then turned the gun on himself. Case closed, investigation ended, bodies released to families within 36 hours. No autopsy was performed on either man. For 95 years, questions have surrounded the Greystone deaths. Why was the family physician called before the police? Why was the crime scene cleaned before investigators arrived? Servants reported that bedding had been changed. Blood had been wiped from surfaces. Why was there no autopsy when 2 men died violently? Why was the investigation closed so quickly when a $100 million fortune and a major political scandal were involved? Some historians believe the official story is true. Plunkett snapped under pressure. Murder-suicide, case closed. Others believe both men were murdered to prevent their testimony. The investigation silenced permanently. Still others suggest N killed Plunkett, who was threatening to reveal everything, and then himself. The truth died in that room. But the photograph survived. A figure at a window, already watching, already troubled, already standing in the room where everything would end. 11 days before the shots were fired. Here's what I keep thinking about. Hugh Plunkett was N. Doheny's childhood friend. They had known each other for decades. They delivered that black bag together. And yet one of them ended up dead at the other's hands, or so the official story claims. What do you think really happened in that room? Murder-suicide? Double murder to silence witnesses? Something else entirely? I want to hear your theory in the comments. Edward Doheny Sr. was acquitted in the bribery trial, the only defendant to walk free. But he never recovered from his son's death. He died in 1935, broken and reclusive. The Greystone Mansion, built as a wedding gift, site of tragedy, was eventually sold to the city of Beverly Hills for a fraction of its construction cost. Today it's a public park. Tourists walk the gardens. Film crews rent the grounds. The guest bedroom, 2nd floor, 3rd window from the left, is not open to visitors. The Doheny photograph captured a murder before it happened. A figure in a window, evidence in plain sight for 90 years. But our next photograph contains a different kind of hidden figure, not a killer, a soldier, an armed guard defending 27 miles of paradise against an enemy most people have forgotten. The Queen of Malibu, and the private army that kept California's most beautiful coastline locked away from the world. The California coast, 27 miles of pristine shoreline stretching from Santa Monica to Ventura County. No Pacific Coast Highway, no beach houses, no restaurants, hotels, or movie star compounds, nothing but sand, bluffs, chaparral hills, and the endless Pacific. This panoramic photograph, 6 by 18 inches, 3 plates combined, cyanotype process giving it distinctive blue-gray tones, captures Malibu as it existed before the modern world arrived. For 90 years, this image sat in the Huntington Library's California collection, cataloged as a landscape photograph, unremarkable, overlooked. Until 1998, when a historian researching the Range family requested a high-resolution scan. What she found hidden in the shadows changed everything we understood about how Malibu stayed empty for so long. 2 figures are visible in the photograph. May Range, the so-called Queen of Malibu, on horseback, her foreman beside her pointing toward the ocean. But there was a third figure, hidden in the shadow of a coastal bluff. Armed, watching, part of a private army that patrolled this coastline around the clock, keeping the world out of paradise. The composition sweeps approximately 270 degrees. Pacific Ocean dominates the left third of the frame, waves breaking on empty beach, kelp beds visible in shallow water. Coastal bluffs rise in the center, chaparral-covered hills in the right third. Native California poppies bloom in the foreground, orange dots frozen in blue-gray emulsion. Morning light, 8 or 9 o'clock based on shadow angles. Light fog bank visible on the horizon. May Range sits side-saddle on a dark horse. She wears a riding habit, dark fabric, formal despite the wilderness setting. Her face is visible in profile. She's approximately 46 years old. Beside her, ranch foreman Samuel Fitz sits on a second horse. He's pointing toward the ocean, perhaps discussing property boundaries or pointing out a feature of the coastline. 2 additional horses are tethered to scrub brush in the middle distance. No riders visible. And that's all anyone saw for 90 years. A widow, a foreman, an empty coastline. But when the Huntington Library scanned the original plates at high resolution, when they enhanced the shadows on the far right edge of the panorama, a third figure emerged. The shadow enhancement reveals a man on horseback, positioned in the darkness beneath a coastal rock formation. He wears a wide-brimmed hat. What appears to be a bandolier crosses his chest, and in his right hand, held upright against his shoulder, a rifle. His horse stands sideways, blocking a narrow trail, the only trail connecting the beach to the inland portions of the ranch. He's approximately 800 yards from May Range, watching, armed, waiting. This wasn't a ranch hand who happened to be in the frame. This was a guard, deliberately positioned, part of an organized system. The Range family payroll records from 1910, discovered in a subsequent archive search, list 18 men under the category range security. 18 armed riders patrolling 27 miles of coastline. May Range wasn't just protecting her ranch. She was running a private militia, and they had orders to use whatever force necessary to keep trespassers off her land. May Range became the sole owner of 13,000 acres of Malibu coastline in 1905, when her husband Frederick died suddenly. She was 41 years old, a widow with children, sole heir to one of California's last intact Spanish land grants. And everyone wanted to take it from her. The Southern Pacific Railroad filed for right-of-way the same year Frederick died. They wanted to build tracks along the coast, connecting Los Angeles to Santa Barbara. May's ranch stood directly in their path. The state of California demanded public beach access. The coastline, they argued, belonged to everyone. Private ownership of 27 miles of beach was un-American. Squatters claimed corners of the ranch under federal homesteading laws. They built shacks. They fenced off parcels. They dared May to remove them. And May Range declared war. Court records show she spent over $2 million on legal fees between 1905 and 1930. She hired the best attorneys in Los Angeles. She fought every case to the highest court that would hear it. But courts take time, and while lawyers argued, trespassers kept coming. So May hired an army. Contemporary accounts describe the range guards as professionals. Many were former soldiers. All were armed. A 1909 newspaper report from the Los Angeles Times. Southern Pacific surveyors attempting to enter range property at Point Dume were confronted by armed riders who ordered them to leave immediately. When the surveyors protested that they held legal authority, the riders informed them that legal authority meant nothing on range land. The surveyors retreated. Another account from a homesteader's complaint to the Los Angeles County Sheriff. Mrs. Range's men rode to my cabin at dawn. There were 6 of them. They gave me 1 hour to pack my belongings and vacate. When I protested that I had filed a legal claim, they shot my horse. They said the next bullet would not strike an animal. I left. May Range presented herself to courts as a lone widow defending her homestead. But behind the scenes, she ran a private army willing to use violence to protect what she considered rightfully hers. The photograph captured one of those soldiers, hidden in the shadows, doing his job. This is where it gets complicated for me. May Range was defending her legal property. The land was hers. But she was also using armed violence to keep out surveyors, homesteaders, and the public from accessing beaches. Was she a hero protecting her family's legacy? Or was she a villain hoarding paradise that should have belonged to everyone? Where do property rights end and public good begin? I'm genuinely curious what you think. May Range fought for 20 years to keep the world out of Malibu. She hired a private army. She spent millions on lawyers. She won almost every battle and lost the war. But the irony runs deeper. Her defeat created the scarcity that made Malibu priceless. The bankruptcy that destroyed her created the exclusivity that would make a single Malibu house worth $177 million. She failed her way into creating the most expensive real estate in America. May Range lost, eventually. In 1923, the California Supreme Court ruled that the state had the right to build a highway through her property. The Southern Pacific Railroad's right-of-way was confirmed. May's legal options were exhausted. But here's the twist. By 1923, the automobile had changed everything. The railroad never built its coastal line. Passenger trains couldn't compete with cars. The right-of-way that May had fought for nearly 20 years became a highway. The Pacific Coast Highway, the iconic roadway that winds along Malibu's coast today. May had delayed construction long enough for technology to change. The railroad she feared was replaced by a road she could live with. And something else happened during those 2 decades of legal battles. May ran out of money. The legal fees consumed her fortune. The property taxes drained what remained. By the 1930s, May Range was forced to do the one thing she had fought for 20 years to avoid. Sell. Facing bankruptcy, May Range made a calculated decision. She would sell, but only to the right people. In 1926, she subdivided a small section of beachfront into exclusive lots. She called it the Malibu La Costa Colony, what would become known as the Malibu Colony. Her restrictions were unprecedented. Only approved buyers, no commercial development, no public access to the beach. The lots would maintain the privacy and exclusivity that May had always sought. Her first buyer, Clara Bow, Hollywood's original it girl. Then came Bing Crosby, Gloria Swanson, Gary Cooper, Ronald Colman. Hollywood discovered Malibu, and Malibu became synonymous with celebrity. May Range died on February 8, 1941. She was 76 years old. By then, most of the ranch had been sold. The Malibu colony had passed to individual owners. Portions had become state parkland. The highway ran directly through what had been her private paradise. She retained only the small headquarters parcel where she had lived for decades. She died watching strangers subdivide her kingdom. Her family scattered. Some descendants reportedly live modest lives, unaware of what their great-grandmother once controlled. But May Range's failure achieved something her success never could have. By fighting so hard for so long, she prevented the kind of dense development that consumed the rest of the California coast. By losing slowly, selling parcels only when forced, she maintained scarcity. And scarcity created value. In 2022, a single Malibu house sold for $177 million. More than May Range's entire fortune at its peak. More than she spent on 2 decades of legal battles. More than she could have imagined. The armed guard in the 1910 photograph was defending something he never lived to see become valuable. The Queen of Malibu created an empire by losing it. And hidden in the shadows of that panoramic photograph, rifle in hand, watching for trespassers, is evidence of how far one woman would go to protect a dream. The Irvine photograph documented a triumph, consolidation of an empire. The Doheny photograph captured a tragedy before it happened, a killer watching from a window. The Range photograph revealed a defense, armed guards protecting paradise. Our fourth photograph documents something colder, more calculated, more deliberate. September 1951, San Francisco, the boardroom of the Hearst Corporation. 5 sons gathered around a conference table, 3 attorneys presiding over legal documents. Their father, William Randolph Hearst, builder of the largest media empire in American history, had died 1 month earlier. The photograph appears straightforward, a family signing necessary paperwork, an estate being settled, business as usual. But hidden in the corner of one document, visible beneath an attorney's elbow, was a handwritten notation that would explain why 67 living Hearst heirs will never control their grandfather's $13 billion empire. William Randolph Hearst loved his company more than his sons, and he made sure they could never destroy what he built. Black and white, 8 by 10 inches, glossy finish, stamped on the reverse, Hearst Corporation Archives, September 1951. A formal boardroom, 20-foot mahogany conference table dominating the center. Crystal chandelier reflected in the polished wood surface. American flags flanking a large portrait of William Randolph Hearst on the wall, the founder watching over proceedings even in death. 8 men sit around the table. At the head, George Randolph Hearst, eldest son, age 47, dark suit, grim expression, hands folded. He should be assuming his father's throne. He looks like he's attending a funeral. Beside him, William Randolph Hearst Jr., age 43, most closely resembles his father, leaning forward intently, the family journalist, the one who wanted to run things. Then John Randolph Hearst, age 42, looking down at the documents rather than the camera. Randolph a person Hearst, age 35, youngest son present, appearing distinctly uncomfortable. David Whitmire Hearst, age 36, sitting slightly back from the table, disengaged. The 3 attorneys, Richard Berlin, CEO of Hearst Corporation, confident and composed. Jacob Gordatowski, trust specialist, pen in hand. Martin Huberth, corporate counsel, whispering to Berlin. On the table, multiple copies of the trust document, approximately 40 pages each. Signature pages visible, wax seals, yellow legal pads with handwritten notes. The sons signing away their birthright. Only they didn't know it yet. In 1997, William Randolph Hearst III, grandson of the founder, filed a lawsuit against the Hearst Corporation. He claimed the family trustees were being kept ignorant of major business decisions. He wanted transparency. During the discovery process, attorneys subpoenaed all original trust documents. Archivists were ordered to scan everything at high resolution. That's when they found it. Beneath attorney Jacob Gordatowski's left elbow, partially obscured by his arm, the edge of a document page is visible. And on that page, handwritten in pencil, later erased but still legible under high-resolution scanning, a notation. The text reads, 8 Corp plus 5 Fam equals 13/family minority permanent. Below it, 813 equals 61.5% Corp control. An arrow points to a paragraph with the note, per WRH instructions. Initials JG, Jacob Gordatowski. William Randolph Hearst had designed the trust structure to ensure his sons, and all future descendants, could never control the corporation. 8 corporate trustees, 5 family trustees, 13 total. Family always in the minority. Unanimous family agreement meant nothing. The 8 corporate trustees would always outvote them. This wasn't an accident of legal drafting. It was the founder's explicit instruction. And now, 46 years after his death, his grandson was discovering the truth. This one really bothers me. William Randolph Hearst built one of the greatest fortunes in American history. He had 5 sons, and he deliberately designed a system to ensure they could never run what he built. Was this wisdom, protecting the empire from incompetent heirs? Or was this cruelty, telling your children they're not good enough even from beyond the grave? What would you do if your parent left you money but stripped you of power? Tell me in the comments. William Randolph Hearst built a 28-newspaper empire through force of will, massive spending, and absolute personal control. He invented yellow journalism. He may have started a war. He dictated every headline, approved every editorial, controlled every decision. And he watched his sons grow up. Private letters discovered in the Hearst archives reveal his assessment. To a business associate, 1945. My boys are good boys, but they are not me. George drinks too much to be trusted with decisions. William has talent but no discipline. John thinks like an accountant when the business needs a showman. Randolph cares more for horses than headlines. David seems to care for nothing at all. To his attorney, 1948. The business needs steadier hands than blood provides. I have watched great newspapers destroyed by inheriting sons who understood nothing of what their fathers built. I will not let that happen to what I have created. And most devastatingly, from 1950, 1 year before his death. I built this for the long run, not for the next generation to scatter. They will have money, they will have comfort, but they will not have control. Control requires competence I do not see in them. William Randolph Hearst loved his empire more than his heirs. And he made sure the empire would survive them. Hearst didn't just structure the trust to minimize family power. He included an enforcement mechanism. The in terrorem clause, Latin for in terror, also called a no-contest clause. Article 7 of the Hearst Trust states, any beneficiary who contests the validity of this trust, or any provision herein, or who seeks to modify the powers granted to the trustees, shall forfeit all rights to distributions under this trust. Such beneficiary shall be treated as having predeceased the settlor for all purposes. Challenge the will, lose everything. This is why the 1997 lawsuit was dismissed. William Randolph Hearst III's attorneys showed him the clause. The judge reviewed it, and the case was withdrawn before trial. Even seeing the handwritten notation, even understanding that their grandfather had deliberately disinherited them from power, the family could do nothing. Challenge it and lose your income. Accept it and remain wealthy but powerless. For 74 years, the Hearst heirs have chosen wealthy powerlessness. Not one has contested the trust. Here's the uncomfortable truth that Hearst descendants must live with. He was right. 90% of wealthy families lose their fortunes by the 3rd generation. The Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Pulitzers, great American dynasties that fragmented, squandered, and disappeared. The Hearsts are now in their 5th generation. The fortune has not just survived, it has grown. The Hearst Corporation reported $13 billion in revenue in 2024. The family fortune stands at $22.4 billion. 67 heirs share distributions that can exceed $10 million per person annually. None of them control anything, but all of them are extraordinarily wealthy. William Randolph Hearst III serves as chairman of the board. He is 76 years old. His title sounds powerful. His authority is limited by design. Stephen R. Swartz, not a family member, has served as CEO since 2013. He makes the decisions. He runs the empire. The founder's sons couldn't destroy what he built, because he never let them try. The notation hidden in that 1951 photograph, family minority permanent, became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The family remained minority. The empire remained permanent. Cold, calculated, effective. Here's the question that haunts me. 90% of wealthy families lose everything by the 3rd generation. The Hearsts are in their 5th generation and still worth $22 billion. Was Hearst's cold calculation the right call? Would you rather be a Hearst heir, wealthy but powerless, or would you rather have had the chance to prove yourself, even if it meant risking everything your grandfather built? What matters more, the money or the meaning? Look at the photograph again. 5 sons gathered to sign documents they didn't fully understand, believing they were inheriting an empire. They were inheriting income. They were not inheriting control. Their father's portrait watches from the wall. Even in death, he's presiding over proceedings. Even in death, he's making the decisions. The notation beneath the attorney's elbow, erased but not erased enough, hidden for 46 years, discovered by the very grandson it was designed to control, tells the real story. Family minority permanent, per WRH instructions. William Randolph Hearst built the largest media empire in American history. He controlled 28 newspapers, magazines, radio stations, and movie studios. He bent American politics to his will. He may have started the Spanish-American War through the power of his headlines. But his greatest act of control came after he died. A structure designed to outlast him, a calculation that proved correct. His empire survived because he trusted strangers more than his sons. One last question before we move to our final photograph. These four families, the Irvines, the Dohenys, the Ranges, the Hearsts, they all built empires through ruthlessness, patience, and calculated decisions. Some held land, some held secrets, some held power by giving it away. If you were building something to last for generations, which approach would you take? Hold everything and never sell, trust your children, or design a system where blood means nothing and competence means everything? I want to know your philosophy for building something that lasts. 4 photographs, 4 hidden truths. A buyout document clutched in an immigrant's hands. Empire consolidated in an afternoon. A figure in a window, watching, waiting 11 days before murder. An armed guard in the shadows, defending paradise with rifles. A margin notation in a trust document, ensuring family never controls what family built. Our final photograph returns to where California's transformation began. May 10, 1869. Promontory Summit, Utah, the completion of the first transcontinental railroad. The most famous photograph in American industrial history, 2 locomotives facing each other, the golden spike about to be driven, the nation united by rail. Every American has seen this image. But no one noticed what Colley's Huntington, one of the big 4 railroad barons who built the Central Pacific, was holding behind his back. A ledger page, partially visible, documenting $43 million in fraud. The photograph that celebrated America's greatest engineering achievement also documented America's greatest theft. May 10, 1869. Promontory Summit, Utah. The most celebrated moment in American industrial history. 2 locomotives face each other. Central Pacific's Jupiter from the west. Union Pacific's number 119 from the east. Between them, a crowd of workers, executives, dignitaries, and opportunists who traveled to the middle of nowhere to witness something unprecedented. The driving of the Golden Spike. The completion of the first transcontinental railroad. East meeting West. America united by iron and steam. This photograph has appeared in every American history textbook for 150 years. It hangs in museums. It defines an era. Teachers point to it when explaining manifest destiny. Documentaries use it to represent the dawn of modern America. Everyone has seen this image. No one has truly looked at it. Leland Stanford stands at center, holding the ceremonial spike. Thomas Durant of the Union Pacific shares the spotlight. Behind them, the Big 4, the men who built the Central Pacific, Stanford, Mark Hopkins, Charles Crocker. And Colley's Potter, Huntington. Look at Huntington. He's standing slightly behind Stanford, slightly to the left. His posture is unusual. His left arm is positioned oddly, pressed against his chest, hand near his inside coat pocket. For 150 years, no one asked why. When archivists examined the original glass plate negative, not the cropped reproductions in textbooks, but the full original image at Stanford University, they found something protruding from Huntington's coat pocket. A document folded, partially visible. Evidence of $43 million in fraud. Carried to the ceremony celebrating the crime. Albumin print from wet plate collodion negative, 8 by 10 inches, sepia tones with some fatting. Photographed by Andrew J. Russell for Union Pacific and Alfred A. Hart for Central Pacific. The composition is chaotic, 200 people crowded between 2 locomotives. Champagne bottles visible in several hands. American flags on both engines. The Utah desert stretching empty in every direction. At center, Stanford performs for the camera. The golden spike raised. the silver mallet ready. He'll miss the spike entirely when he actually swings, his aim legendarily poor, but the photograph captures the posed moment of triumph. Thomas Durant of Union Pacific stands beside him. Grenville Dodge, Union Pacific's chief engineer, positions himself prominently. Charles Crocker, the largest of the Big Four, his massive frame unmistakable, stands to the right. Mark Hopkins is barely visible in the second row, shorter than those around him, already suffering from the illness that would kill him. And Colley's Huntington stands behind Stanford's left shoulder. He's not competing for camera attention. He's not celebrating. His expression in the few photographs that capture his face suggests a man with other things on his mind. His left hand is positioned against his chest. His right arm appears to be behind his back. And from his inside coat pocket, a paper edge protrudes approximately 2 inches. The original glass plate negative, examined at high resolution, reveals the document more clearly than any reproduction. Ledger paper lined, handwritten figures in neat columns. A partial heading is visible, Contra. Contract and Finance Corporation. Below the heading, columns of numbers, the largest figure visible, $3,200,000. A date notation in the margin, April 1869. The paper edge is worn, suggesting frequent handling. This wasn't a ceremonial document. This was a working ledger, something Huntington consulted regularly, something he kept close. The Contract and Finance Corporation was the Big Four's secret weapon. A construction company they created. A construction company they secretly owned 100% of. And the document in Huntington's pocket documented exactly how they used it to steal $43 million from the United States government. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Step 1, the Big Four incorporated the Central Pacific Railroad. They became its executives. Huntington was vice president, Stanford was president, Hopkins was treasurer, Crocker handled construction. Step 2, they created a separate company, the Contract and Finance Corporation. On paper, it was an independent construction firm. In reality, they owned every share. Step 3, as executives of Central Pacific, they awarded construction contracts to Contract and Finance Corporation. They set the prices, they approved the payments, they signed the checks. Step 4, as owners of Contract and Finance Corporation, they received those payments. They pocketed the difference between what they charged and what construction actually cost. The numbers tell the story. Actual construction cost for the Central Pacific, approximately $36 million. Amount billed by Contract and Finance Corporation, $79 million. Difference pocketed by the Big Four, $43 million. $43 million in 1869. The equivalent of over $1 billion today. And Congress couldn't investigate. The Contract and Finance Corporation was a private business. Its records were confidential. The Big Four refused to open their books. Huntington kept those books close, even at the ceremony celebrating completion. Especially at the ceremony celebrating completion. Why would Colley's Huntington bring evidence of fraud to the most photographed event in American history? The answer lies in who was standing beside him. Huntington never fully trusted his partners. His private correspondence, preserved in the Huntington Library, ironically founded by his nephew, reveals a man constantly watching his back. Stanford was pompous and politically ambitious. He wanted credit for everything. He was already positioning himself to run for governor, then senator. Huntington wrote, Stanford believes his own legend. He speaks of building the railroad as if he drove every spike. He forgets who arranged the financing, who secured the contracts, who managed the accounts. If he becomes too powerful, he may forget who knows what. Hopkins was reliable but dying. His health had been failing for years. Crocker was volatile, prone to outbursts and indiscretions. He'd already made public statements that drew unwanted attention. Huntington trusted none of them completely. And so he kept records. Insurance. Proof that if anyone turned on him, they would go down together. The ledger in his pocket wasn't evidence against himself. It was evidence against everyone. Mutually assured destruction, documented and carried close to his heart. I want to stop here and ask you something directly. Collies Huntington stole over $1 billion in today's money. He built America's greatest engineering achievement through systematic fraud. He never faced trial. He died one of the richest men in history. His name is on libraries, beaches, and boulevards across California. Should we still honor people who built great things through terrible means? Or does the achievement get erased by how it was funded? Tell me what you think in the comments. Can you separate the legacy from the crime? 3 years after the Golden Spike, the credit Moblier scandal exploded. Union Pacific had used the same scheme, a shell construction company, to inflate costs and pocket the difference. Congressional investigators exposed the fraud. Careers were destroyed. Vice President Schuyler Colfax was implicated. The scandal became synonymous with Gilded Age corruption. Investigators turned their attention westward. Central Pacific, the Big Four, the Contract and Finance Corporation. But the records were gone. Huntington later testified that the Contract and Finance Corporation ledgers had been destroyed in the ordinary course of business. Fire, he suggested. Lost, perhaps. Certainly not available for review. Historians believe the books were deliberately burned in 1873, when congressional scrutiny intensified. 4 men who documented every penny of their fraud chose to destroy the evidence rather than risk exposure. Only fragments survived. Partner correspondence referencing figures, congressional testimony describing documents, and apparently a ledger page carried in Collies Huntington's pocket on May 10, 1869, visible in a photograph that no one examined closely for 150 years. The Golden Spike photograph didn't just commemorate an achievement. It documented the crime that made the achievement profitable. Collies Huntington escaped prosecution. He died in 1900, worth the equivalent of $36 billion in today's currency. He never faced trial. He never confessed. He never apologized. But the empire he built contained the seeds of its own destruction. His nephew, Henry Edwards Huntington, inherited the California Railroad interests. Henry expanded into streetcars, the Pacific Electric Railway, 1,300 miles of red cars connecting Los Angeles to its suburbs. For a generation, the Huntington transportation monopoly controlled how Southern Californians moved. You rode Huntington rails or you walked. Then came the automobile. By the 1920s, private cars were choking the streets that streetcars needed. Ridership declined. Service was cut. Fewer riders meant less revenue. Less revenue meant more cuts. The last Pacific Electric passenger service ended in 1961. The red cars became museum pieces. The tracks were pulled up and paved over. The Huntington name survives on libraries, boulevards, and beaches. But the transportation empire, built through fraud, maintained through monopoly, was destroyed by technology the founders never anticipated. The tentacles of the octopus, as critics called the railroad, withered and died. What corruption built the automobile unmade? 5 photographs, 5 hidden truths. Each revealed something the founders wanted documented, but not immediately understood. But there's one more image. A bonus photograph that connects the Huntington Railroad fortune to an unexpected conclusion. Paris, a wedding portrait. Arabella Huntington, Collies' widow, the wealthiest woman in America, is marrying again. Her new husband, Henry Edwards Huntington. Collies' nephew. A nephew marrying his uncle's widow. Society recoiled at the scandal. But when genealogists examined the wedding portrait 110 years later, they noticed something on Arabella's left hand. Something that explained everything about the Huntingtons, about marriage, about empire, about what really mattered to the people who built California. She was wearing 2 wedding rings. Silver gelatin print, 16 by 20 inches, formal studio portrait. Photographer, Nadar Studio, Paris, the most prestigious celebrity photographer in Europe. The setting screams Belle Epoque luxury. Velvet backdrop in deep burgundy, ornate gilded chair in Louis XV style, fresh roses in a crystal vase, soft natural light supplemented by studio lamps. Arabella Huntington sits in the chair. She is 63 years old. Her dark hair shows silver streaks elaborately arranged. Diamonds glitter at her throat and ears. Her expression is composed, unreadable even in high resolution. She wears a cream-colored silk wedding gown with Valenciennes lace. The pearl-encrusted bodice reportedly contains 2,000 seed pearls. A diamond tiara, part of a collection later valued at $5 million, crowns her head. Standing beside her, one hand on the chair back, Henry Edwards Huntington, also 63, formal mourning suit, expression satisfied. Proprietary. They married on July 14, 1913, Bastille Day. The studio date stamp confirms it. A nephew marrying his uncle's widow, both in their 60s. No children possible. Society called it grotesque. Fortune hunters called it genius. But look at Arabella's left hand, resting prominently on the chair arm, fingers slightly spread, displaying her rings. Rings, plural. When the Huntington Library digitized this portrait at high resolution, the rings became clearly visible for the first time. 2 rings on the same finger, not stacked decoratively, worn together as wedding bands. The first ring, inner position, closer to the knuckle, is a heavy gold band with a large central diamond, approximately 8 carats, Victorian setting, the gold worn smooth from 29 years of daily wear. This is Collies Huntington's ring, given to Arabella in 1884. Worn from that day until this photograph was taken. And beyond. The second ring, outer position toward the fingertip, is a platinum band with an emerald-cut diamond, approximately 5 carats, newer Art Deco transitional style, obviously recently placed. This is Henry Huntington's ring. Purchased from Cartier, Paris, July 1913. The receipt still exists in Huntington archives. Arabella was wearing both rings, her first husband's and her second husband's, on the same finger. At the same time, she never removed Collies's ring, not even when she married his nephew. For 110 years, this detail was invisible. The photographs published were too small, the resolution too low. Only modern enhancement revealed the truth. Arabella Huntington entered her second marriage still wearing her first. To understand those 2 rings, you need to understand who Arabella really was. She was born around 1850 in Richmond, Virginia. Real name, Belle Yarrington. Arabella was an affectation, a reinvention. She appeared in New York City in the early 1870s calling herself Mrs. John Worsham. No marriage certificate for John Worsham has ever been found. Historians believe the marriage was fictional, a cover story. She lived in a Manhattan townhouse. The mortgage was paid by Collies Huntington. At the time, Collies was married to his first wife, Elizabeth, who was an invalid. In 1870, Arabella gave birth to a son. The birth certificate lists John Worsham as father, but the child, Archer, looked exactly like Collies Huntington. Everyone knew. No one said it publicly. For 14 years, Collies and Arabella maintained a relationship while his first wife lived. When Elizabeth died in 1883, Collies married Arabella the following year. Archer was already 14 years old. New York society never forgave her. Ward McAllister, the self-appointed arbiter of New York's 400 elite families, demanded $9,000 for introductions. When Collies refused, McAllister leaked gossip. Kept woman, illegitimate child, bought her way up. Arabella and Collies were permanently blackballed. They retreated to California and European travel, never accepted by the society they could have bought 100 times over. When Collies died in 1900, Arabella inherited over $50 million. She became the wealthiest woman in America. She could have any ring she wanted. She kept her first husband's, the man who had rescued her from obscurity, the man who had legitimized her son, the man who had defied society for her. Even when she married his nephew, she never let that ring go. This is the question I keep coming back to. Arabella was a kept woman. She had an illegitimate child. Society rejected her completely, and yet she built one of the greatest cultural institutions in America, the Huntington Library. She wore her first husband's ring for the rest of her life, even while married to someone else. Was this loyalty, love, survival strategy, or all 3 at once? What do the 2 rings mean to you? I'm genuinely curious. What would you have done in her position? What do the 2 rings mean? Interpretation 1. Loyalty. Arabella never forgot who made her. Collies took a risk on a woman with no background, no family, no legitimate claim to society. He married her despite scandal. He gave her his name. She would wear his ring until she died. Interpretation 2. Business. The marriage to Henry wasn't romance, it was consolidation. Henry inherited nothing directly from Collies, they weren't blood relatives. But by marrying Arabella, Henry gained access to her portion of the Huntington fortune. 2 rings meant 2 empires, joined by matrimony, not love. Interpretation 3. Protection. Arabella had been vulnerable once, a kept woman, an outsider. The ring from Collies was proof of legitimacy, evidence that she had been married, truly married, to one of the richest men in America. She would never give that up, not even for his nephew. Interpretation 4. All of the above. People are complicated. Marriages are complicated. The relationship between Arabella and the Huntington men, Collies who saved her, Henry who merged with her, Archer who may have been Collies' son, defies simple explanation. 2 rings, 2 marriages, 2 Huntington men. One woman who navigated impossible circumstances and emerged wearing the evidence of her survival on her left hand. She chose to display both rings prominently in her wedding portrait. Not hidden, not apologized for. Declared. Arabella and Henry lived quietly after their Paris wedding. They avoided New York, which had rejected them. They built collections, art, rare books, manuscripts that rivaled any in America. Arabella died in 1924. She was 74. She had worn both rings for 11 years of marriage to Henry. She wore both rings until the end. Henry died in 1927. His health had declined since Arabella's death. Some said he never recovered from losing her. Their combined fortunes, the railroad money, the streetcar money, the art, the books, became the Huntington Library in San Marino, California. One of the greatest research institutions in the world. Open to the public, welcoming millions of visitors. The society that rejected Arabella is forgotten. The 400 who blackballed her have no modern equivalent. Ward McAllister is a footnote. But the Huntington Library endures. And in its collection, alongside Gutenberg Bibles and Shakespeare folios, are 2 rings. Collies' ring, Henry's ring, both worn by the same woman, both preserved for history. The kept woman from Virginia built an institution that will outlast everyone who judged her. And the photograph, the wedding portrait with 2 rings visible on one hand, tells the story of how she got there. 6 photographs, 6 hidden truths, 6 moments when California's founders documented what they wanted posterity to understand, but not immediately. James Irvine, a buyout document clutched to his chest, $150,000 becoming $200 billion, patience conquering speculation. Greystone Mansion, a figure in a window, 11 days before murder, wealth unable to protect from scandal's reach. Malibu coastline, an armed guard in the shadows, a private army defending paradise, failure creating the scarcity that made everything priceless. Hearst boardroom, a margin notation beneath an attorney's elbow, family minority permanent, love of empire exceeding love of heirs. Golden Spike, a ledger page in a coat pocket, $43 million in fraud, crime documented at the scene of celebration. Paris wedding portrait, 2 rings on one hand, loyalty, business, and survival worn as evidence for all to see. Each photograph told a different story. Empire consolidated, murder foreshadowed, paradise defended, dynasty controlled, fraud committed, identity preserved. But together they tell one story. The story of how California was built. Not by luck, not by timing, not by the benevolent forces of history. By calculation, by ruthlessness, by vision that extended beyond single lifetimes. By willingness to do what others wouldn't and document it for posterity. What do these photographs teach us? That great fortunes are rarely built by great virtue. That the founders of dynasties are willing to do things, buy out partners, hire private armies, disinherit their children, carry evidence of fraud, that ordinary people will not. That photographs lie, but also tell the truth. The posed image projects what the subject wants the world to see. The hidden element reveals what they wanted to remember. That patience is the ultimate advantage. The Irvines held land for a century. The Hearst structured a trust to last generations. The families who sold early are forgotten. The families who held are dynasties. That failure can be more valuable than success. May Rindge lost everything and created Malibu's value through her loss. The Doheny's tragedy made Greystone a museum. The scandals that destroyed reputations preserved the stories. That empires outlast the people who build them if they're structured correctly. Colley's Huntington is dead. His library welcomes visitors. William Randolph Hearst is dead. His corporation posts record revenues. And that hidden in every photograph, in every document, every artifact, every piece of evidence we inherit from the past, are truths waiting to be discovered. If we look closely enough, if we enhance the right shadows, if we ask what the founders wanted us to find. Before I close, I want to ask you one final thing. These 6 families built California through means we might find questionable today. Fraud, private militias, disinheriting their own children, affairs, and illegitimate heirs. Yet their names are everywhere on universities, libraries, cities, beaches. If you could go back and change one thing about how any of these dynasties operated, what would it be? Or do you believe the ends justified the means? I want to hear your honest thoughts. Every family has photographs. Boxes in attics, albums in closets, digital files never organized. And every photograph contains more than what's immediately visible. The expression that doesn't quite match the occasion. The object held in someone's hands. The figure in the background no one remembers. The detail that meant something to the person who posed, something they wanted preserved even if they couldn't explain it. The dynasties of California weren't different from your family. They were just operating at larger scale, with more at stake, with more resources to document their victories, their fears, their secrets. The hidden elements we discovered, documents, figures, guards, notations, ledgers, rings, were always there, visible to anyone who looked closely enough, waiting for technology that could enhance what the eye missed. What's hidden in your photographs? What did your grandparents want you to find, someday when you were ready? What truth is waiting in your family's archive, visible but not yet seen? The founders of California documented their empires in silver and light. The evidence of what they built, how they built it, what they sacrificed, and what they protected. No longer hidden. Finally understood. If this video helped you see history differently, if you found yourself looking more closely at the photographs you thought you knew, consider subscribing. We publish new investigations every week. Old photographs with hidden stories, dynasties that shaped the world, evidence that was always there waiting to be found. And if you have photographs with mysteries you can't explain, details that don't quite make sense, faces no one can identify, documents or objects that seem out of place, share them in the comments. Your family's hidden story might become our next investigation. The California dynasties documented their empires for posterity. Now it's posterity, and we're finally looking close enough to understand what they left us. This has been Old Money Empires. Thank you for watching, and thank you for looking more closely.